Today's video is going to be about some Linux software called StreamController. This is software that manages an Elgato Stream Deck. So I know there are other alternatives to the Elgato device, but the Stream Deck is considered really to be the benchmark device when it comes to these types of devices. And just to also say who the video is really for, I know it's aimed obviously at Linux users using the deck, but if you are a Windows user, don't just tune out, because the first half of my video I'm going to look at some use cases and some demos of sort of how and what I'm using the Stream Deck for. So it may be of interest to you anyway, even if you are using the Windows side, because a lot of the functionality that's shown in the Linux app is going to be present, should be present in the Windows software for the Elgato Stream Deck. So the productivity and other ideas you can probably make use of yourself. And then yes, certainly this type of functionality is also suited for things like YouTube and Twitch streamers. I think they're already probably quite used to using Stream Decks, but just to show you as well what you can use the Stream Deck for. And another very useful scenario is gaming. I'm going to show as well, I've been playing Snowrunner quite a bit, and Snowrunner has got quite a few global shortcuts you make use of. Not all of them that you use all the time. The thing is, how do you remember all the shortcuts? So it's nice to have a visual sort of view of a couple of buttons you can just quickly press to make use of. And for example, the other day I also opened up the OpenBVE train sim. I had no clue how to even get the train going again. And then I realized, I can't remember all the wacky shortcuts that particular game has got. So I created one page on the Stream Deck just to get the train moving, and that I'll also show in the demo sort of what functionality there is. And it's very easy to set up a different page for each different game or different application. And then of course, lastly, productivity, which all of us would probably make use of. Whether it's a word processing app or a spreadsheet or whatever the case, I will show how I'm using it sort of for a spreadsheet, some basic things I'm using. But it also helps you, again, it's shortcuts you can't always remember, but a visual cue for a button or something that you can quickly press to execute something, that is actually extremely useful. The less often you use some useful feature, the better it is almost to put it on a Stream Deck with a nice visual button on it. So lots of sort of ways and means that you can use a Stream Deck. It's definitely not just for gaming or for streamers. So hopefully, some of what I show will also spark some other ideas. There's obviously countless other ways of using it. So just to go over the agenda then that I'll be covering in the video. The first bit, I'm going to do some just demo usage of how I'm using it with certain games and productivity apps and other things. And then I'm going to run through sort of how certain of the buttons get activated and how you link them to certain functions and can customize them. And I'll end off with sort of more around the menu side, what sort of menu options there are, for pages and for the application settings. So I think let's just move then straight into the application and start having a look at it. So this is actually what the Stream Deck application looks like. You'll see your sort of whatever screen is active at the moment with layout, background, label, and so on the left. I'll go through those a little bit later, really. I've got an insert here on the right, which shows you the physical Stream Deck, and you can see there's my finger in real time. And what I just want to show, I'll try and keep that open most of the video, but what I'm doing here really is if I press this button to go to the OBS Studio sort of functions that I've set up, you'll see that I can also just double click on the application as well, and it's going to emulate the same sort of functionality. So you should see the two of these mirroring each other as long as they're both active, throughout the video. So let me just start with OBS Studio. There is a plugin specifically for OBS Studio, but you can mix and match here. Certain functions are going to execute calls directly through to the OBS Studio sort of webhook server. And that is, for example, these zoom buttons that I'm showing over here. Normally, if I'm doing a video, I can hit any one of these buttons while I'm recording the video. And I can use this one, for example, to zoom to the top left of the screen. You'll see there is the top left. And if I go there, it'll go to the right. That'll take me down to the center. That'll take me to the bottom. That'll be the bottom left. This is what I'll be using in the background if I need to zoom in while I'm talking about something. And then this button over there, I've got set up to just sort of zoom out again. These ones are also mapped to OBS Studio, and if it might not be that visible, but you can see the time counting up there at the moment. That is my start recording and stop recording button, and this one over here will hit the pause, just to pause the recording. The button I'm using down here is to enable or disable inputting sound from the computer speakers, and we'll see that just now when I do the one game I want to demo. And because I was also using one of the scripts that does sort of zoom and follow with the mouse, I've got that activated as well. So if I was to, for example, press this, you'll see now it'll zoom in wherever the mouse is. Let's sort of put it up there somewhere. It zooms in, and as I move the mouse around, it is automatically adjusting, you know, the sort of the zoom view. So that's the zoom follow button. All that button is doing is it's just hitting a global shortcut within OBS Studio. So if your plugin is not talking directly to the application like this one is to OBS Studio, then you can also use global shortcuts as well. So you can mix and match depending on what's available, you know, or what isn't available really. So that's what I've got set up for OBS Studio. But we can have a look a little bit later at what else the plugin itself offers. I've normally just mapped the top left button over here to going back to the main screen. This is another interesting button over there. And it's a button that's got two states really. So it's a button that does display the CPU percentage. You could have this also as a CPU graph if you wanted to, but that'll use a bit more resources. But what is of interest I wanted to show is if you press the button, you can get it to switch states. So it's switched now to memory percentage, and if I hit it again, it goes back to CPU percentage, and I'll show just now sort of how that works. Similarly here for the clock button, if you click it, it goes to digital, and if I click it again, it changes states back to an analog button. And if I was to click the speed test button here, that's another plugin, it'll actually run a speed test, and you can watch it, you know, as I said, either there or on the button itself. As soon as it's finished the speed test, the result should pop up, which could take a few seconds. While that starts up, I'll just show the next button so long. It's obviously running the speed test still. Let me just start up the editor, because there is something I want to show here. Okay, there's the speed test. It's just come back. So I'm going to just quickly show you on editor, text editor, but this could be your email, which is what I actually use it for. It could be anything else. I'm just showing you the example of how I insert, because I regularly, you know, end off my emails with regards and my name. So I've set up this button, and it's got a nice little picture of a pen and an arrow, so it reminds me that's for my signature. If I press it, basically, it's going to insert text. And you could make this absolutely anything. This could be text. It doesn't have to be text that you're inserting into an email or a, you know, something else. It could be a macro. It could be anything. So, you know, it's just another example of sort of what you can use it for if there's things you regularly have to insert and type about. I've also got some audio software, which I've put on the music button. By default, it does for Spotify. But I've got things like a volume reduction. And if you watch over there, you'll see the volume level also reducing and increasing. If there was music playing, and I'll demo it just now when I play the Strawberry player, it'll show you a sort of a image of the song that's playing. You can go next, forward, back, pause, and you can mute the sound as well. But I use this also generally for any audio that I'm busy playing. I'll come to Snowrunner just now. These three buttons, because Linux, you can set up sort of custom activities where your whole view and your setup of your desktop changes. I switch between this is the image means for my desktop. That is for my recording for OBS Studio, and that is my gaming view. I can press these buttons and quickly change to, you know, different setups. Yeah, it is going to show. You can see the background has changed. That's my gaming setup. This is my OBS Studio setup, and you'll see there, for example, on the left, my stats screen is now missing. If I press the desktop button, you'll see there the stats screen has appeared again, because I've literally switched virtual desktops, if you want to put it that way, with the press of a button. I also run my updates. I've got a sort of specific update script that I run which has got a couple of specific parameters that I use, and that button is set up to execute that in a terminal screen actually. And if I press it, you'll see the terminal screen comes up automatically and it starts running that sort of update process. So this is opening a terminal and executing whatever the specific command is that you've got set up. And likewise, I've got the yay command that runs over there. These are sort of quite interesting because I regularly work with Obsidian Notes. I execute quite often the one that is for Manjaro Linux Notes, which is the Manjaro symbol there. And the other one is for the Elgato Stream Deck itself, in fact. So if I was to hit that button, it'll literally bring up Obsidian Notes ready and with that sort of note loaded. See there, it's starting. And this should be an Elgato note, that's the Steam Deck. There we go. There's the Elgato Stream Deck notes already loaded. So you could use a button like that as well to execute and start up any application on your computer. So we've seen now how to start up a terminal session and run a command. These were actually applications that start up as well. So that really is my main screen. What I've got here for the Zoom screen, I'm just going to switch over here between the different pages that I've got set up. The reason why mainly is because if I hit the Zoom screen, it's got something else interesting that it does. And, well, if I was to hit, oh, sorry, I could actually just go back quickly. If I show you that button, when that button executes, it actually runs the Zoom application and then changes the page. So I didn't want to open up the whole Zoom application, but you can also stagger or stack your actions like this as well. So if I go to Zoom, you'll see these are a couple of sort of quick actions that I've got set up for Zoom already. So typically I've got things like switching of, I think that was the video source. I've got two cameras, muting sound from the sound symbol on the left. Oh, I think that's muting the camera, sorry. No, there's muting the camera. Why have I got two here? I think one is the microphone and the one is the audio sound. So that's muting the audio sound. I think that's muting the microphone sound. This one is to share my screen. That is to pause. That is to go to text chat. That's to end the Zoom session. And this is to raise the hand. And that was to actually pause the camera. But what I've just done for demo purposes, I've also got two other interesting buttons over here. And these buttons are not working with the Home Assistant plugin. There is a plugin specifically for Home Assistant that helps you sort of more easily pick various features. These were buttons that I've actually set up to execute terminal commands. And what this one is doing is it's running a terminal command to go fetch what my current battery percentage is. If I hit it, you'll see there it's returned 89. That's 89% that the battery is, the solar battery is at the moment. And this is to indicate when my battery last was full. How many days ago was it fully charged? It should actually be fully charged because it did charge today. So that should return a 0. And if I hit it, yeah, there you'll see it actually returns the 0. It's just something I need to keep track of because if my battery is not charged, fully charged every week or two, it causes the cells to imbalance a little bit. So I like to make sure that the battery is fully charged. It's something that I can keep an eye on my Stream Deck, every day. And then there is a weather widget which works with a weather plugin. Again, it's just showing the weather forecast, which is 16 degrees and cloudy today. But if I hit it, it's going to alternate and change states to the wind, which is wind direction and speed at the bottom there, and then obviously alternate back again. So yeah, most of this was actually just some of the Zoom functions that I've set up. But remember, you can set up any functions that you regularly use, say within Zoom calls. You can set up productivity wise for yourself, whatever images you want to use, icons or shortcut buttons. I'm just using the global shortcuts within Zoom to program these. I can't remember all these shortcuts, how to mute microphone, speakers, camera, that sort of thing. So Stream Deck helps me sort of remember this sort of thing. Okay, we've actually covered most of these. I'll just have a check here. We've got Home Assistant as well. So these are actually using the Home Assistant functionality itself. And I said I'll show a little bit later how it's actually been done in more detail per button. But for now, what's important is I can call the announce function to announce that it's busy raining at the moment by just pressing this button. It's got the battery state of charge that it's pulling through live all the time. So if I had the screen open, or if I go to the screen at any time, I can immediately just see, well, my front gate doorbell battery is at 98%. My solar battery's state of charge is at 89%. The amount of time I've got left to an empty battery, if I had to switch off my grid power now, would be 4.84 hours estimate at the moment. The battery full was last 21 days ago. Now that's not up to date actually. I see that hasn't pulled through properly. There may be some issue. I'll have to check on that there. The AC load is 864 watts, 871 watts. So you'll see this updates in real time as the current load in the house is busy changing. So you can keep this at a glance in front of you if you want to on your Stream Deck. Yeah, if you wanted to know, by the way, yes, you can have 2 or 3 Stream Decks connected with the software as well. So you could have one dedicated just showing you the Home Assistant and another one showing something else if you want to. I've also set up a couple of features here. So this is not Home Assistant. This is using, this is using Home Assistant, because within Home Assistant, I've got it integrated with my ASUS router. So I've pulled through some functions here. So this, for example, is showing that the router's WAN connection is on at the moment. If I hit that button, which I don't want to do now because my wife will have a fit, but if I hit that button, it'll cut the WAN connection. If I hit this button, it's going to do a Wi-Fi refresh. It refreshes the Wi-Fi connections. If I hit this button, it reboots my router. And this button I can demo because this is the LED lights that are off at the moment, just to show you how it reads the status through Home Assistant for my router. If I was to press this button now, it's going to show that the LED lights are turned on my router. And if I hit it again, it will go off when the lights have disabled. There, the lights have disabled, and it's read that status from through Home Assistant through to the router. So my router is linked to Home Assistant software management. So it just shows you how you can use your Stream Deck to read statuses and change statuses for Home Assistant, which in turn then is controlling things like your doorbell, your Wi-Fi cameras, your battery levels, your solar system, and various other things. And these, as I said, were just a duplication really of the battery state of charge and the time to go to 0 there. So that was the Home Assistant functionality. I also do quite a lot of my editing within Kdenlive, the application. And certain things I do very regularly, but I can just never remember how to do these things. So some of those things are things like here. Jump to so these things you'll see, because they've got at the bottom a little image of the timeline within Kdenlive, the video editor. This start indicates just jump to right to the beginning of the video that I'm busy editing. This one is jump back to the previous cut, the last cut that I made in the timeline. This one will take me to the next cut that I've made if I've jumped back 2 or 3 or 4 cuts. And that button, of course, will take me right to the end of the clip. These 2 buttons are going to allow me to zoom in closer or further out from the timeline. This button takes me back 1 second on the timeline, and that button takes me 1 second forward on the timeline. Trying to remember what this button actually does now. Oh, it's frames. It goes back a frame and it goes forward a frame on my editing timeline. And you can see that, by the way, over here. You'll see under the hotkey it says there frame minus. It's the one I've highlighted. And this key does a razor cut where I'm standing on the timeline. This does a select mode to select what's under the timeline. And this button over here will help me move the whole timeline left or right or whatever as I'm busy editing. So again, you could adapt these to whatever you're using, but just use this as the example I would use for things like on my editing software. You know, whether you're using Adobe editors or whatever the case is, you can adapt this to whatever editor you're using and use whatever images you want to as well. The other one I can show, we've done the OBS. I can show you the OpenBVE. I will just demo the SnowRunner actually properly in the game itself. But for OpenBVE, which was a train sim, you can see here I've got little pictures of the doors. So this button is going to open or close the left doors. That button is going to do the right doors. This one I seem to remember was to bring the train to a stop. That one was to add more power. So that was speed up. Oh, sorry, there's reduce, slow down. That was to engage the forward or reverse on the train. This is for the horn. That is to activate the lights. That was to display the speed stats. That was for the route stats. That's the timetable stats over there. And that is the station distance. These are all things you can toggle on and off on the HUD basically. And yeah, okay, there I see this was in a line. I remember that was to add power. That was to reduce. So you'd either reduce power or reduce braking. And the bottom one was actually the brake, start applying the brakes itself. So this just helped me jump into the game very quickly and start playing again, because I didn't have to remember what all these strange, you know, sort of different key combinations were. So I'll show these last ones, the spreadsheet, Strawberry music player, and the gaming sort of live. So let's just start up, I think. Let me just go to SnowRunner. This is one of the games that I play quite regularly. And these are sort of the high-level controls that I'm using within the game. So things like all-wheel drive, diff lock, camera angles, horn, map. That's to operate the crane, and I'll show that in a few seconds what does quite interesting over there. Engine start or stop, HUD activate or not, function menu, pause the game. This is, for example, gear up or gear down, and that's the parking brake and the lights on and off. But let's just start the game up, and I can just show you quickly how the buttons work in the game as well as the crane. Okay, let's just switch to the other screen where the game is in progress. So there we are now in SnowRunner, and what I just wanted to say was here is, well, you can see the truck there with its lights on at the moment. And if I was to hit, for example, the lights button over here, you can see there the lights go into high beam and low beam. And you can press the horn, camera angle. What else have we got there? Well, there's pause. And the HUD display, you can turn the HUD on and off. You can turn the engine on and off. Depending on your truck's functions, whether you've got all-wheel drive or you've got, there you can see it does say diff lock is always on. So those are just some of the high-level, you know, sort of controls that are quite quick and easy to sort of work with. But what I really want to show here was those are just using global shortcut keys, you know, so whether they Alt S, Alt T, whatever the case is to actually perform that. What is going to be of interest is the crane, because now you've got to apply long presses to actually operate the crane. So let's first of all just operate crane mode, which is if I press the function button there, and we just go down to, where's crane? Well, you can activate the anchors, but I wanted, there's something I must actually do here is add a shortcut to the crane button when I, when I press to go to the crane features, you'll see I've got a little crane image here in the button. I've actually just realized, you know what, I must actually get it to hit the button to also activate crane mode, because you'll see there is a button C. Oops, if you look on the screen, down in the center, just below the truck, you'll see the C for crane mode. So actually in future, to automate that better, I can sort of double up on this button and hit the C automatically. So it does give you the shortcuts at the bottom of the screen, but you'll see if I hit this button, it changes now to a whole bunch of crane actions there. So for example, if I wanted to lift the crane, I could press this button over here. If I want to extend the crane, I could press that button. And if I wanted to bring it back in, I could press the other button next to it. Or if I wanted to rotate, I could rotate either way. That was for the anchors over there. You can see the anchors moving. And then I can lower the, well, okay, I don't have the hook at the moment, I don't think, but you can raise and lower the crane as well over there. Now, obviously, again, like I said, you can set these up any way you want to, really. If I just, oops, sorry, if I just move around there, say, and see, I'm not sure what we can actually, doesn't look to me like I've got anything, unfortunately, within close range to activate, but these two buttons over here that I've set up rotate the load that is busy attached to the crane at the moment, because you can actually rotate that as well. This one I've set up to actually lock to the item to be picked up. So you press that and it'll actually latch on. And this will raise and lower the actual cable on the crane itself. So, you know, again, this was just a nifty way for me to be able to remember how to use the crane operation sort of quickly and easily using my Stream Deck, rather than having to remember the buttons, because at the bottom there, D, S, A, W, R, F, C, V, Q, E, num0 doesn't always mean a lot in terms of how's the crane actually operating. You know, with the Stream Deck, I can just look at the images on the buttons here, and I can really quickly and easily sort of intuitively pick up what I need to do. And then once I'm out of crane mode, I can just go back to Snowrunner mode by pressing that button. And, you know, as I said, again, those other buttons would operate. So, yeah, that's really how I do it in Snowrunner. And similarly, like I said, for OpenBVE or other games, you can set up a whole bunch of these things for whichever game that you're busy playing, Flight Sim, whatever the case is. So I think let's just go back to the Stream Deck again. Okay, so we are back on the main screen again. And what I wanted to show now really was just how you can automatically switch pages on your Stream Deck when you start an application. And this means you don't necessarily then need a shortcut button here every time to, you know, start or switch to that page. So in this example, I'm going to start up the Strawberry music player. And you should now see, as the player starts, you should see the Stream Deck page changing automatically there. It takes about a half a second or so. In essence, it's now quickly brought up the page that's applicable to this application. So I can play the start to start playing. That is the pause and the play button. So you'll see it does switch as well when you actually press it. You've got a mute button over here, and you can see that mute button also changing its setup or its appearance there to show that it's muted. And you've got volume controls as well over there. So it's all your sort of quick connections. I'm not sure the bottom row is not working here as it should. What it's supposed to do is, it's not showing the images, but the functions I see are still working. This was actually to show you the volume level here. As you adjust the volume level, it is supposed to show graphically the level, you know, 40, 35, whatever the case is, as it changes. This one is supposed to be showing you a little image like you see here on the track that's playing. It's supposed to display that in the button, which it normally does. But there was a software update yesterday, and I don't know if it actually has broken something. And then these were things like next or previous. So you could go to the next song or the previous song. Well, that's the only ones I've really got set up there. And you'll also notice it changes that you can set a background image for a particular page on every Stream Deck. So I haven't done it for the others, but for my music players, I have set up. There's a Spotify background for the Spotify player, and there's a Strawberry for the Strawberry player, just to sort of help you remember, which one you're busy working on at the moment. So that is a way, as I said, that you could have unlimited pages, really. You could have one setup that activates a page every time you open a different application if you want to. So let me just go out of there. The other thing I wanted to show really was productivity. It's the last thing I really want to demo. I'm going to use something like LibreOffice spreadsheets. And the main reason is that I use spreadsheets a lot. So I have set up, and I just want to actually change it to the spreadsheet manually because I don't have an auto. I should have set this up as an auto sort of a sensor. I've just named it spreadsheet. Essentially, these are things that I have to do quite often when I'm working with spreadsheets. I tend to work with a lot of columns and numbers, which I'm adding up currency and that sort of thing for, home finances and that sort of thing. So one of the things that I've got there obviously is the alignments, and you'll see it's all images, so it helps you sort of see what you're going to do. That's left align, center align, right align, and that would be full justify if it was normal justification text. And then the other thing that I do quite a bit is I also, first of all, I also switch numbers to a currency. So this symbol over here that you see on the Stream Deck itself, the little button, I've used a little currency with number to remind me what it's for. So if I press that, it changes it to the rand currency there that I use. And then the other thing that I use quite a bit is this, to sum up a column, to give it a total, which should appear over there. Then if I press this button, and there you go, you can see it's put in the sum automatically. The other one, I'm not sure if it was working properly, but it was supposed to be to highlight if something was not a number. So if I went like this, I think I was using it to try and pick up, sort of errors like that, where you might not see that 34 is a number, and I'm just not sure if it is actually doing it. But the idea was I could highlight a whole bunch of data and then press this button. Oh, it is sort of, I think you can see there the color is, if you look very carefully, the color of the 34 is actually not blue, it's black. I don't know if it did actually adjust that now, but the point is this is what the purpose of this number was supposed to be. And that is why I've got that sort of image that I've got over there. But remember, this could be Microsoft Office or Excel. It could be LibreOffice, FreeOffice, whatever you use as your productivity tool, whatever you find is useful things, instead of having to try and remember, the various shortcuts that you may see like here on the menu. The idea was that you could just have your buttons set up ready for you to quickly use, that you regularly use on your application. So yeah, that's really it then as far as productivity goes. Like I said, it's just an example. What I now want to do really is move off the demo side of it and go through the buttons and how the buttons are set up and how they function. But to do that, you need to understand that you need the relevant plugin. So another thing we must just know is that even though there's talk about official plugins, that's official to StreamController. It's not using the Elgato plugins. So these are plugins that people have developed for StreamController. And the reason is there's quite a few people developing already, quite actively, but we would like more developers to participate and take part and sort of spread out and add more functionality. So, hopefully this video also reaches people that might now be interested to do that. Here on the top right of the StreamController app is a menu. And what I want to show you was Open Store. So this is now where you would see what plugins are available and you can install them. This one, for example, Audio Switcher, I haven't installed. You can jump to things like its GitHub page, I think. You can click over there to download it. And yes, I know it says official and verified, but that is, as I said before, for the StreamController app. Don't confuse that with Elgato itself. So you can click over here. Oh, it takes you to the web page, so it's actually off screen now. You're not going to be able to see that, I'm afraid. But if you click on it there, it gives you a bit more information about it, and there is usually switch between audio inputs. I'm not using this one at the moment. It's just not a functionality specifically that I'm using, but there is the audio controls. So this would control volumes and that sort of thing. If you've got a laptop, battery would be applicable. This was the clock button that I showed a bit earlier. There's a counter one where you can hit and it just starts counting. This is the plugin that's quite essential because it controls things like switching pages and buttons. It's the sort of the functional controls for the StreamController itself. So this is a pretty essential one. GNOME is if you've got the GNOME desktop, it'll call various window calls and that sort of thing. Helldivers was a game. Home Assistant is the one that I'm already using. Media for StreamController was things like play, pause, next, previous, that sort of thing. So it drops this functionality in automatically for you. I'm not using mic mute at the moment. There is for OBS Studio, that plugin. This is quite an essential one often as well, is it's various operating system commands. So this will be things like if you want to execute things within a terminal screen, or if you want to switch based on what applications are open, a lot of your operating system type controls or control that you want to make use of. Like it says there, control your operating system. This is quite a useful plugin. If you're using the Pi-hole application, that's another one. The send HTTP requests I am using. This is the plugin that I'm using. I'm running HTTP requests to request certain information from my Home Assistant as well. So it's an alternative way of doing certain things. But you could fire off all types of different types of HTTP requests. It's not using your browser itself. It fires off a request and it returns a result like a value. So that is how I saw things like I fired it off and I pulled back a value for my battery percentage for my solar system. And if I show you that button just now, it'll be a little bit more obvious. This is the speed test button. If you're using Twitch streaming, there is already an integration for that. I'm not using that though. There's a volume mixer, and there was also the weather button that I did show a little bit earlier. So that is where you get your plugins. And if you want to delete, you can just click the red thing to delete it again. Then you can also switch to icons. At the moment, there's 3 different packs of icons. But you can also use custom icons. So, this doesn't limit you at all. And then wallpapers. These are predetermined wallpapers for things like, I think this was for if it goes into sleep mode, like a screensaver type thing or a screen background. But again, you can set these manually yourself as well. So once you've selected a couple of these things, they will become available within buttons then to operate with. So let's have a look at a button. I can also just double click in the emulator or the simulator as well. So for example, this is a button that if I press it, you can see here it changes to the other page which has got all my OBS Studio functionality. So let's have a look at how that button operates. If you click and you select on that button, on the left over here is a couple of options you can now use for that button. So you can adjust things like the percentage size of what's displayed in the button there, and then you can also adjust the vertical and the horizontal alignment up or down. This is just fine-tuning adjustments if you want to. Then the background, at the moment it is set to transparent because I have got an icon that I've set there already, but you could set it to a particular color background as well if you wanted to. Say for example, I'll set that to green. You'll see there the background has actually become green. Or I can just reset the color. And maybe while we're on that, let's just show you the icons as well. So you can either delete your icon or you can click on it to change it. By default, it's going to take you to the various icons that you've already loaded or made use of. And in this view, you can just click to select it, but you can also delete it from the drive where it's saved. Or if you wanted to, you could also click here to browse files, and essentially all that happens here is you're going to browse to your hard drive on your laptop or PC, and you can select any JPEG or PNG or GIF file. In fact, you can even select an MP4 video file if you want a video to play in it, or animated GIF. So that is where you would go and select, and then as I said, it'll change your icon over here. And I've used quite a lot of these are customized. Most of these, in fact, are all customized icons. Then the labeling are 3 levels. So some applications are going to update the labeling automatically. So if I, for example, stand on this one that's a CPU button, you'll see there in the center the 5%. That is updated automatically by that plugin. So you can play here if you wanted to with the top label or the bottom label. There are 3 rows and the colors of the icons. But the point is, what I'm saying here is don't go and change this if it's an auto fold one, because you're going to override, or whatever you set will be overridden by the application. So if I go back to OBS, you'll see here I've already got OBS set at the bottom, just to remind me that is for OBS, even though I've put the image there. But you could type at the top here, top, and you're going to see there it appears on the top, and it also appears live on the actual Steam Deck itself. So if you want to take it out, you can just press reset. If you wanted to change the middle, you could type in middle, and you could change that color, as well if you needed to. There we go. As well as font size as well, and font type. So there's quite a lot of things you can change. So that really, the labels is just what you see top, middle, or bottom there. But the important part is the actions. So maybe I should just go to an empty button, because it's going to maybe be a bit easier if I show it on an empty button. No, sort of hasn't got an empty button. Let's just take Spreadsheet, because that will have a few empty buttons. So, if I click on an empty button, you'll see everything is blank already to start with. But under actions, you're going to start off by, you have to add an action. And these actions are going to be dependent on what plugins you've loaded. So these are the ones I've already got active at the moment. So, you could choose for audio control, it's going to give you things like you can set this button to do adjust the volume. I'm not sure what the dial controller is. I think that is another type of Steam Deck where you've got the turnable buttons. You can display a volume, you can have mute, or you can have set volume. Under clocks, you could choose either an analog or a digital clock. For counter, you would just select counter. This is the deck control, so you could have a button then to set brightness, to change the page, change the state, and that'll be the state of a button, to go to sleep, or to set the brightness. I'll come back to these just now when I show some of those buttons. Home Assistant plugin, you choose it first, but now remember, now you've got to set a couple of settings. So you've selected Home Assistant, you click over here, and you'd need to put in I think my Home Assistant is actually already configured, because there is a place where you had to configure your IP address, port number, and an API key to connect to your Home Assistant. But because I've already set mine up, it's already connected. If you didn't have it set up, I think you would get that prompt then to set that up. You just set that up once for Home Assistant, and thereafter you could click on domain. Within Home Assistant, you can set up things like automations, binary sensors, buttons, calendars, cameras. Sensors are obviously very, very popular. That's one thing you use quite a lot. It really depends on what you've set up. Let's just take, for example, sensor. I've selected sensor, and now, because this is already linked to my Home Assistant, it's going to read these here from my Home Assistant. These are actual sensors that are already set up. So all I've got to do is select here, AC loads, which is in watts, I think. My AdGuard home, average processing speed, DNS queries, weather station, whatever. And if I take just something simple, let's just take, say, that AC loads. It's quite a simple one. There we go. And if it was a service, you can define certain additional parameters, icon, text, and so on down here. Oh, there's your Home Assistant settings. Okay, so sorry, it was at the bottom here. There's my host port number, whether it's running SSL, I'm on LAN only, and that would be your API token that you put in. It confirms that it's connected. So just remember, you do need to say here under text, show entity state, because if you don't have it, the button's going to be dead. It's not going to actually retrieve that entity state or value. So you click on there, show entity status, and you can decide there if you want to switch it rather to show the unit of measure, or the friendly name, or whatever the case is. But in this case, we actually want the the value. And it's got a couple of additional options. So you can, center. You can also have it adapting the size automatically. That's if it drops, for example, to 2 digits or increases to 5 digits. It will resize automatically. And you can also say they show the unit of measure, and you'll see it's appeared there now as well on the button. And at the same time, it's also showing live on the Stream Deck. So the important thing is, just remember that show the entity state. Then you've got one action, but you can actually stack actions. So you can add a second action. That means if you press that button, it's going to execute action 1, 2, or 3. So, you could have it do something else. If I had media, for example, it could be showing media info. So you could also adjust that order, by pressing these buttons up or down. And if you want to delete one of them, you could just say there, remove action, and it's gone. So that's how you'd stack up the actions. Let's just have a look at the other actions then. So that was Home Assistant. Then under Media, you've got, this is for playing media now, Info, the next play, pause, previous, or thumbnail background. OBS Studio at the moment has got these functionalities. So what I'm really using a lot is the switching of the scene. I've got scenes set up for, zooming in, out, that sort of thing. Replay buffer, play, pause, recording I'm using. There's the input dial. I don't have the dial, obviously. Input, mute, toggle recording on, off I'm using. Replay buffer, toggle scene item, toggle, that's actually supposed to be streaming, I think. Toggle streaming. Toggle studio mode. This could be useful to have your virtual camera on or off. I mean, I could be using it for this camera over here, for example. I could have that probably toggled on or off, as well as virtual camera and a transition as well. Then on the operating system side, this is where you can choose things like a CPU graph or usage percentage number, a click, a delay, a hotkey, and that will be where you're going to be using things like an Alt-S or Alt-T or Alt whatever the case is. Memory graph, memory usage, move to point XY on the screen, and then execute a click. So that's where you'd stack these things up if you wanted to. Run command I've used quite a bit, and then also write text. So, just by example here, if I show you the hotkey, you would now go and basically configure the keys. So you'd press the keys to record, say Alt F, let go, and you'd say confirm. You could set a delay for those keys between each key press, and you can toggle on and off to repeat while holding. That's going to basically repeat that Alt S the whole time while you're holding. Or you can say toggle hold until release, and this is what I've been using for my game like Snowrunner. I've said to it hold until release, and if I'm holding that button to rotate the crane, it keeps rotating until I release the key. So that is where you'd execute that sort of thing. So that's the OS. Then this is the HTTP requests. You can execute a GET request or a POST request, and I'll show an example just now of that. There's your speed test to drop that in as a button, and then your weather. You could choose either the weather forecast or the wind direction. And I think let's go and have a look at those buttons, and I can show you how you could change state between these two for your button. If we go back, I just wanted to delete this one, remove that action there. If I go back to the main screen, remember I said this was a toggle. If you press this button, it toggles between the memory percentage and the CPU percentage. So if we go and have a look now, you'll see at the top here is a state 1 and a state 2. So at the moment, state 1 is the CPU, state 2 is the memory. How I got the state 2 was I just pressed the plus here to add an additional state, and then state 2 appeared. What you do is you set up state 1 with its action, and I gave it 2 actions. CPU usage, which I selected, and I chose another one from the Deck plugin, and I said to it, change state to, and I said to it, number 2. You can change it there for plus, to 1 or 2. So what happens is, on this button, which defaults to state 1, if you press the button, it's obviously got CPU usage, but it will execute the second action, which is change state, and it changes it to the second state, which is this one. And you'll see there it's got as its action memory usage, and it's got a change state again, because remember now if you press it in this, you wanted to go back to state 1 again. We're on state 2 now, and you'll see there I've got state 1. And that effectively is how, if I press this button, it goes between state 2 at the moment to state 1. And you can see it switching up here at the top as well. That's really how you do it. And I've done the same thing here for this clock, analog clock with a change state. And on the second state, you'll see it is digital clock, and it changes state back to state 1. I did the same with the weather, but you can use these states in quite clever ways as well. This is just a very simple way of showing you what I was doing with it. As I've said already, these buttons are just changing to other pages. So it's using the deck plugin to change page. And if you look there, which page? Well, it changes to the OBS page. It's as simple as that one. You have, by the way, as I mentioned before, you can have more than one deck connected. So you could have had maybe 3 decks, and you could have said, well, change to the OBS page, but on, whatever your other deck is. So you've got that. That is also a change, and you'll see for the zoom, how I've set it up is that it's going to run a command. It's going to open the zoom app automatically when I press the button, and it then switches the page to show the zoom page. So again, that's how you can stack your commands to execute more than one thing. The other thing maybe of interest is these are hotkeys. So all 3 of these are just plain hotkeys in Linux to switch the activity type. And if you have a look, at the moment, it is set for the left meta and the F1 key. That is really how I'm using it to set that. And I've set up a custom, icon to remind me which one it is. This one will be F2 and that'll be F3. This one is the text that I said. So you'll see it's using the OS plugin, and it's using the function write text. And all that I've done is you can just put the text in the box there, whatever text you want. You can, change it to whatever you want, and it's going to insert it, whatever is active or selected on the screen. You can also make a comment up there if you want to try and remember what it does, or if something else you need to remember. This one is an example of a button with a run command, and I'm using Plasma, but you'll see there is the type of syntax. I'm just using a plain console with its parameters that it has to execute. So that one is fairly simple, but I'll show 1 or 2 that get a little bit more interesting. So for example, the Yay updates is a similar one. It's running it very similar, just change the command. But these will be a little bit more different. The ones that start up the application for Obsidian Notes, it's also a run command. But you'll see it is slightly different. I'm running the bash command to start up bash with a -C, which says to it start dash and execute this command inside. And if you run that command normally inside your terminal, it's going to execute OBSCLI, which is the application, and then it's going to open that note, find and open that note. So there's an example. And just bear in mind that look at the inverted commas here very carefully. You've got double over here on the ends, but for this, you've got to embed that with a single quotes over there. You can also optionally say if you wanted to run detached or display the output or not, that sort of thing. So yeah, that was that. The other one that's of interest is on Zoom, because I had set up some of these manually. So this one that fetches the battery percentage from Home Assistant is not using the Home Assistant plugin. It is using the GET request line. And this took a little bit of work. I did make use of a Discord channel and I think the GitHub pages as well to make contacts with the dev who helped just assisted me with some of the syntax to get this right. But the GET request essentially was the URL that you've got to execute, and that will be the URL with the port number for my Home Assistant, and then /API/state/sensor battery sock. That is the correct URL that you would use to execute that API on Home Assistant. So this is unique to Home Assistant. I'm just giving you the example at the moment. And then there's a header that you needed to pass, and this is part of Home Assistant. So this is going to be different for other things maybe you're running. But the point is there was a very specific syntax. I'm not going to show the whole thing because that's got my bearer ID, the API key in it here.
But in essence, you've got to format this thing correctly. That is that JSON header that gets passed with the URL if you were in a browser, for example. There's a state filter that you pass as well. And in essence, what this whole thing does is it executes it as if it's in a browser navigation bar at the top there. And what happens when you execute it is it returns a value. And what you're seeing in that button at the moment there and there is the 79. That is the value that actually gets returned. The rest over here, bat percentage and the icon, is just something that I configured here as part of the button. You can see there it's got an icon, and under the labels I put a bat percentage there at the top. And that's really it. That's how you'd use that. If I go look here at the other one, the full days ago, you'll see this one is done a bit differently. It's running a command. I'm not using that get request. Same thing. Also going to my Home Assistant, and you'll see this is running a command. So sh, I think it was the shell command, like bash, -c, and then it executes this command. I don't want to go all the way because it's going to have my API probably as well. You can see there is my bearer API key on the right. So the syntax is quite important, but in essence, if you took everything that was in these double brackets, the curl, that would be like a command that you execute on your terminal to pull something from your Home Assistant. So you can do it various ways just to communicate to Home Assistant. This could have been anything else, any other smart device or other command that you want to execute, to communicate to something and retrieve something. I could have, for example, even used this because I can probe the Modbus registers on my Victron solar system as well from the command line. I could have put that in here as well and executed it alternatively and then returned a value as well. You'll see here you do actually say there also display the output. So it waits until the command is finished and then it displays. Otherwise you'll see it as it's executing. You don't want to see that there. Detached, I'm not using at the moment, but again, so this works on button press. So you'll see there's nothing there. If I press it, there it returns the value of 0 at the moment. So that's another way of executing, commands or getting values back. The weather is pretty well much the same. I showed you already with the states, so there's nothing fancy about that. All these with Zoom are just plain hotkeys. So mute mic in Zoom is Alt-A, and that's what I've done. I've just used the hotkey and set up the Alt-A there. So global hotkeys are very, very easy to use. As I said, the OS and the hotkey option, and you can actually control quite a lot of things, including OBS Studio. So if I go to OBS Studio, you'll see here some of these are like this, for example, is a hotkey. There's a hotkey that I've set up in OBS Studio. If I was to press, what is the button? Hang on. Left Alt Q. That combination activates follow mouse for me. So it's a global shortcut key, and all I'm doing in StreamController is on that button, it's just hitting that hotkey combination for me. Simple as that. But some of these are actually, you'll see here, it shows you in brackets OBS. It's using the OBS plugin for the switch scenes. Well, you could have again used a hotkey if you wanted to, but the thing with a hotkey is it would work well anywhere, and you might have lost focus as well. You want to make sure that with switch scene that it is actually executing it inside OBS Studio. So if I go there, again, you'll see there is the configuration that you've set up once to connect to OBS Studio. And really all I did is configure this at the bottom where it says scene, because remember this is the switch scene button. You could choose any of the scenes that you've already configured. These are all the scenes, and it pulls this from OBS Studio. Once you've connected to OBS Studio, it'll read these values for you, just like the Home Assistant did a little bit earlier. So, you'll choose there, what is it, top left, there we go. And this one is going to be the top middle scene. Yeah, as I said, I'd already set those up. Here you can see the recording time. Obviously, it's not going to be as long as this because I'm going to have to edit out quite a bit of bloopers and problems. But if I click on that button, all I've done is I've chosen the toggle recording button. There's no settings really for it. But what it is showing you as well the whole time is that your session is busy recording. if I was to hit that, it would, stop recording. And I have just set custom these again. I've included my own custom backgrounds for these icons. Otherwise, they're blank. They're not going to show you anything really. And I think as far as showing you how various of the buttons work, that is sort of it. Kdenlive was very much the same. I just used hotkeys, global shortcuts. That's all I set for these was the different global shortcuts and the custom icon. And that is pretty well much that. So there's another important aspect around this was I have used at the top left here, I've been using this to switch between all the different pages that I've set up. As I said, remember some of these could be automatic switches. Others I've got set up on my buttons here, that I've already set up the buttons to switch. But if you wanted to, you would change pages. To delete pages or set page settings, you would click on this little button over here, open the page manager. And this is now where you would add a new page if you wanted to, or if you've got existing pages, you can click on the page and each one has got a couple of settings that you can change as well. So you can obviously name your page over here, which is quite important. And you would say if it's an auto change page, whether it's to stay on the page until another page matches. These regexes here will be what you use to do the auto change. And maybe I should just use one of them. I showed you Strawberry a little bit earlier on the media player. You'll see the difference here is auto change page is enabled. Stay on this page, yes. But you'll see here in the window class regex, I've got Strawberry set. All that this means is if a window opens that's got the title or the class name of Strawberry, then activate this page automatically, bring it into the foreground. And a nice thing they've also included here is it'll show matching windows. You can use it to check and see what is it matching. Well, at the moment there's nothing because I don't have Strawberry open. But if I had Strawberry open, when I click over here, it would actually show Strawberry there with the proper name of the window. If there were different applications that have also got Strawberry in it, it's going to show me more than one, and then I'd know, oops, there's a problem. I need to make this a little bit more exact. This is for the title of the window. That only matches the title of the window. This actually matches the window class, which is useful if, you've got multiple applications open, but they all belong to the same thing, whether it's Spotify or whatever the case is. And then also you can just say there under what decks should it be active. Well, I've only got one deck. And for which deck should this be a default page? So on startup, I always show the main page. And if I go back to main, you'll see that is activated at the bottom. Matching windows, by the way, why you're seeing that is because there is no query set in here at the moment. So it's showing all the open windows at the moment. It helps you also find, if you want to choose the name. So just by looking at this, you could use the word desktop in the title, or you could use in class, you could type Plasma Shell. They're not going to be exact, but this is just another way of finding out which title name or class name to use, just as a matter of interest. But you'll see here, default page, one selected. It's selected for this deck. So whenever I start up or boot my PC up and StreamController starts, this page, it always goes to this page by default for this Stream Deck. If you had another Stream Deck, you could set a different page for its default as well. And then, of course, you could also delete your page over here. That's really the page settings. One other thing of interest on this whole page editor is up here on the top on the menu. You can also export. I do export all. That's one way of saving all your page configs and setups and everything. You can just say export and it exports to a JSON file. And of course, you can also import it again if you want to restore settings. So that, by the way, is how you do it. You can also duplicate your page if you want to use it, and rename it to do something else over there. So that really is pages and page options. The only other thing then really is there's another thing I should just show on this view here quickly. We by default have got the page key grid on, which is buttons, showing you the button views where you edit buttons, okay? You can also edit, and maybe let's just go to a page that's also got a background, Strawberry. you can go here to the page settings on the bottom right. And if I click on that, this is where for the particular page, you're going to say, well, override the default deck background. Yes, because I don't have one anyway at the moment. But for this particular page, I want this as the background, and you can choose it. The loop is if you've chosen a video or GIF, then it's going to do a sort of a looped animation like a waving flag or whatever. You can set the frames per second for it. Obviously, remember, the higher it is, the more it's going to load CPU resources. So this applies to the current page, and you can set that for each page you've got. And you can also, for the page, override the default deck brightness and the deck screensaver, which I'll show just now. So you can have it unique to every individual page as well, or just use the default, as I said. So that's the page settings. There's another little setting button here, which actually is for the deck settings, which is the overall brightness for the deck. You can see there it's adjusting the brightness on the insert. I just found 30 works nicely. You can enable the screensaver if you want to, and then set your settings for the screensaver for the deck. And this is where you'd enable a default background. Oh, it's me. Okay. Where you'd set your default background for the Stream Deck as well, unless the page, of course, has overridden it. Then, the one other thing really is just the actual settings menu itself. There's not much here really, but you've got a default that you can set for the minimum hold duration. That's now for repeat. You know, if you've got repeat keys or whatever the case is, you can set a default setting where it's going to get recognized there. You've got a couple of UI settings over here. So you can emulate a button press on a double click. That's within this software. Like I showed, you could click here on these buttons and it would actually change it on the deck. You can enable frame warnings. I'm not sure what the light mode is actually. It's something experimental. You can show notifications and automatically open config options. There's some store settings. You can auto update or not. You can activate custom stores and custom plugins. At the moment, you are loading the ones that the dev has authorized within the store. But you could also do, as I said, you know, if you want to be dangerous, you can sort of install or test your own ones maybe. Performance, you can cache a certain number of pages so that it works quicker, keeping it in memory. But remember, more is going to be faster, but also use more memory. You can also set it to cache the videos, which is also useful. It doesn't have to load them every time you switch pages. On the system, I've already got that there. Keep it running if I close the window. Auto start is working quite well. That'll just make sure it auto starts when you boot up your Linux. Lock the decks when the screen is locked. This is a new feature. Actually, it is working on mine as well. As a matter of interest, I'm working on Plasma X11 at the moment. But I did notice that if the screensaver comes on, the deck goes dead. It goes black. So that is working as it should, but you could enable it or disable it there. Some people might want to keep their deck active, like maybe a button to enter your password automatically. Maybe that's not a good idea, but just saying you could do it. And then use the new resume mode. I'm not sure after suspend. I haven't used that. And then there's also developer. This is for devs to emulate some fake decks to practice with if I wanted to do, for example, a second one or whatever. The data path also was a newer feature added, but it's got a default path. I'm running this as a Flatpak at the moment, but you could move this location if you wanted to, and this is where you would, or this is where you'd go to and verify where it is, and that's where all your data is saved. If you want to back it up, that's where what you'd back up. So I am actually installing this as a Flatpak. It is the recommended way probably to do it under Linux. The reason mainly is because the Flatpak has got all the required dependencies already all included. You don't have to worry with something clashing with something else and how do you compile this or that. So in most cases, most users, I really would recommend that you do use the Flatpak install method. I'll put links below the video as well to where you can find the application and get more information about it. But I must say I've been very, very impressed. I did start off on a different application that was running under Linux for the Stream Deck. And to be honest, it did have a couple of issues and problems and a lot of demands for additional functionality. And then I saw the dev posted one day, you know what, have a look at this project rather. He's recommending that people possibly move to this project instead. And the reason why is because just about everything was already on it, and it's been very, very well developed in a modular fashion as well. There is actually a way, I think, under import, under pages here, if you go back to the pages menu, if you've got the older application, pages, I think under import, there we go. The other application I think was called Stream Deck UI. This is an attempt to import that existing setup that you've already done maybe as far as possible, that you can at least get most of your settings and your things across to StreamController. Obviously, if you've backed up your StreamController, you'd use this option, and that is just for an individual page if you've saved them as individual pages. But yeah, that's really it. I've had a tremendous amount of fun. I've really been enjoying using this application. It's boosted my productivity and certainly made my gameplay a lot more fun as well. And I would certainly, if you are on Linux and you've got a Stream Deck, I would certainly urge you to make use of this application or try it. The Flatpak is very easy to install. If you don't even have a Stream Deck, well, hopefully it's also giving you some ideas of what you could use a Stream Deck for, actually. And maybe you find it worth actually purchasing a Stream Deck. And if you are a Linux user, now at least you know you don't have to be worried about purchasing an Elgato Stream Deck. You can see you've got tons of functionality and things that you can do with it here. So yeah, that's really it. Thanks very much for watching. It's probably a bit longer again, as I never seem to be able to make short videos, but I prefer to put all the information in, and I'll put chapter headings at the bottom. You guys can skip forward or back, to find whatever you want. And thanks very much for watching and enduring it, and keep safe out there, and I'll see you in my next video.